against other countries. I mean, I live here in Indonesia, and I've spent a few years teaching in the schools here, and there's almost no system in place for special needs, or SEL is an unknown term here. And I remember in particular, I worked in a few different schools, and I remember thinking, when I started working in schools, there really wasn't, because I didn't have any background in special needs education, and it really wasn't a problem for me, because I never had any noticeable special needs in my classes. And then I worked in a school where every class that I would teach, so I was teaching, I think, grades 7 and 8, for example, and there'd be 3 or 4 classes at each grade. So say I had 8 different classes, and every class that I would teach would have, 3 to 5 clearly clear students in clear special need, and every class that I taught in would have 1 or 2 teaching assistants who were sat beside the student for the entire class. And I thought, well, what is going on here, where I've taught in 4 different schools and had maybe 1 or 2 special needs students overall, and now I'm in this school and I've got maybe 20 different students across a handful of classes. So I spoke to the school about it, and they basically told me that because there's no system in place, many of the schools don't have the support. It's not necessarily their fault. They're just, they're not getting the support from the government. They're not getting the teachers don't have the training, and so on and so forth. And because there's a highly privatized education system here, schools can largely choose who they admit. What was happening was that most schools, if they had applicants with clear special needs, they just wouldn't admit them to the school. And it happened that this other school that I was teaching at just had a much more open policy, and they were the one school that would accept these students, and therefore they ended up being the school where all those students ended up. That even that school didn't have a great system in place. They just were accepting the students, and that but they didn't have a massive budget to deal with it. They weren't an amazing school in any way. They just happened to say yes where other schools had said no. And that's kind of the state of affairs, as it were, for Indonesia. I wonder if you have any sense how the UK compares around the world. What is the UK doing anything that other countries aren't, or what's your sense there?
Well, I mean, it's for all its flaws, it's highly structured. There's legislation in place. There's the code of practice, which is applicable in England, and I think Scotland have got a slightly different code of practice, and Wales are still operating on the 2014 code of practice. Okay. So there's a lot of legislation in place, which means that needs have to be identified, and as a consequence, there is the support that is available through that process. I mean, parents would argue that it's not sufficient because most people would want everybody wants everything for their child, and everyone wants the best, and it's unfortunate that we have a limited resource, but I'm just trying to think about other countries. I don't really I mean, we get a lot of research from America, and we get a lot of research from New Zealand and Australia, and I think some of the other research that we have isn't translated, but everybody seems to be working in the same areas in terms of special needs. Everybody's looking at the sort of ADHD side, or the autism side, or the early childhood experiences, the ACEs stuff, where people may have had traumatic early experiences. And that is a bit of a driver for things. And there's shared experience and shared information. But to be honest, it's very difficult for me to know what's going on in different countries, because there's no forum for it. There's no international psychology sort of forum where everybody meets up. And I think it's slightly,